morning. Once again, I'm here in South Bend, Indiana with Dr. E. Michael Jones. Happy Oktoberfest. I'm here for another interview. Dr. E. Michael Jones, how have you been?
Gut, sehr gut.
I hear.
Grüß Gott. In honor of Oktoberfest, although we're a little late, I would like to sing my favorite Oktoberfest song. In München steht ein Hofbräuhaus, 1, 2, Xufer. Da laufen manche Fässchen raus, 1, 2, Xufer. Und so hat manch ein braver Mann gezeigt, was er so vertragen kann. Schon früh am Morgen fängt er an, so schön ist im Hofbräuhaus. Thank you, Alex. Welcome to South Bend, Indiana.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I want to start off because I'm so excited. I think a lot of your listeners are as well. How is your new book coming along on American identity?
Good. I'm just about finished.
Awesome. I've been pondering a lot of what we had spoken last about American identity, and I have some thought that I wanted to share with you. One of the things that I think has to do with American identity is the idea of self-sufficiency. This being a hallmark, a pillar of American identity. Doing it, figuring out on your own, not having to ask anybody and not relying on anybody. I think this is a very strong trait of the American character. But I think what happened in the modern world is it metastasized into a form of pride. A form of pride where it's self-sufficient and so American to the point where don't need God. Don't need God. It seems like God was there some of the time, but I've got my gun, I got my rifle, I've got my wits, and that's what I can count on.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
That's exactly right. Emerson called it self-reliance.
Right.
And it's something that basically you had to have when you were on the frontier because the Americans headed west and they had to pretty much do it on their own. And in order to do that, they needed a rifle and so on and so forth. But you're right, it went wrong. I mean, let's talk about fundamental reality. What did Aristotle say? What was Aristotle's treatise? Did he give a treatise on self-reliance? No. He said, anthropos phusei politikon zoon. Man is by nature a political animal, okay? But politikon comes from the Greek word polis, which means city. So man is by nature a being who lives in cities with other men. Well, that's the exact opposite of America. Because all of those people who created America all left cities. I mean, they weren't cities. You would call them little outposts of Anglo-European culture on the coast of Massachusetts Bay. But as soon as they started out west, they lost this communal spirit. And I don't think they ever regained it. And so you're right to point out how the rifle, the gun, is so essential to this communal, the antithesis of this communal spirit. So basically, you now have the ability to conquer nature. Or, you can shoot that deer or you can shoot that Indian who is the native inhabitant, and that's all you need. And so there was actually, it's in Frederick Jackson Turner's book, about the frontier, which is what we're talking about. The transformation of the American, the European, who came to America and stood there in front of the woods. And that's the dividing line between essence and existence. The woods are existence. The essence is the Calvinist Bible he brought with him. And they come together and something's got to give. And the classic example would be Daniel Boone, who was raised a Quaker, wants to go west. You can't go west without a gun. As soon as you pick up a gun, you're not a Quaker. And you became an American. And that's what all of these people have become. And so the gun has taken on this mythic character that gives these Americans the illusion that they can do it all on their own. And so you have the preppers, you got all these people who are storing food, like when the world collapses, I'll be okay, I'll be out in the woods here all by myself. Well, we're seeing, that just happened in North Carolina. And we're seeing, wait a minute, you need other people. And you can't do this on your own. And that's the lesson that the Americans now have to learn.
I agree. And I think much of this is by design when it comes to modernity, atomization, isolation, division. You know, and I keep saying on this when we talk that we as Catholics we should see this, and we should recognize this and unify more, seek more unity instead of bickering over so many small things. But I mean, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I agree. And so you've got a conflict because, as Samuel Huntington said, what's an American? He's an Anglo-Protestant. Well, where do you fit in, buddy? Where do the Mexicans fit in with this narrative? And guess what the next book he wrote was? The Hispanic Challenge. Like 2 years after he wrote the book, Who Are We? Huntington writes the Hispanic Challenge, which is basically, we're going to have to turn these Mexicans into Americans. How do you do that? By turning them into Protestants first. And that's the whole story of California. I told this story. I was out in California in 1992, and I gave a lecture on all of these Hispanic TV stations and everything else. I said, this is going to be the challenge. The only thing that will allow you to preserve your identity in this country is the Catholic faith. That's it. If you give up on that, you're going to be swept away. And lots of Mexicans were swept away. You know, I could tell you lots of stories, but I'm going to say that is the fundamental thing. If you want to come here and you want to retain your identity, it's got to be religious. And now what we're seeing here is that in Europe, the same thing is happening. I'm talking specifically about Ireland. If you want to retain your identity, you better go back to church. Because if you start identifying as a white boy in Ireland, you are going to lose your country, period.
So I've been thinking a lot about this as well. And, you know, it makes me think of, when you bring up Ireland, bring up Mexico and some things, it also makes me think of the recent Gemma interview, this topic about race mixing and Catholicism. And I got to tell you, it's such a pickle. It's such a pickle. And I think for me, it's a matter of priority. Never once. A lot of people like to rain on your parade and say, you know, EMJ is saying that race doesn't exist. This was never the case. This was never the case, that there was this defiance about the reality of race. That was never the issue. I think really the issue was and is a matter of priority. Which do you put first? Is it race and is it country, number one, number two? Or is it God first? Is it seeking first the kingdom of God? Because I got to tell you, people are so eager to go to use AI to translate Hitler's speeches, and this is the direction, and this is the grift, because this is what I call the race grift, and it's people that are pushing this ideology to further confine them into whites versus blacks, whites versus browns, whites versus everybody. And I think that's where a lot of people, they fall into that trap because they're so antsy, they're so hungry to solve the issues now. And I think it leads a lot of people astray and further away from the faith, which is not encouraging.
No, I think that's the fundamental issue that we have to resolve. I think that what we're seeing is a sense of panic. And I think that it's not new, okay? The panic began here in the 60s with the blacks, with this weaponized migration. We did weaponized migration a long time before it happened in Europe. And that was basically moving the blacks out of the South. This was not foreign countries. These are Americans. These people have claimed to be an American before I have a claim to be American, because they were here centuries before my families came over here. Okay, but they lived all by themselves. They had their own culture. I know, they are black. They do look different than we do. I'm not denying that. What I'm trying to say here is, what's the meaning? And the whole point of propaganda is take a fact, like the fact that he's got a certain kind of skin, hair, and nose, and I have a different one, and then put meaning on it. So the next thing you're saying is, did you know that the average Haitian IQ is 75? How the hell does anybody know what the Haitian IQ is? They've never taken an IQ test in my life. That's the type of racial propaganda that is now being promoted because they're in panic mode. So what was the reaction? Okay, early on, the man who who portrayed this reaction best was Clint Eastwood. And I'm talking about Dirty Harry.
There is one question, Inspector Callahan. Why do they call you Dirty Harry?
Well, that's one thing about our Harry. Doesn't play any favorites. Harry hates everybody. Limeys, nicks, heaves, fat dagos, niggers, honkies, chinks, you name it.
How's he feel about Mexicans? Ask him. Especially Spicks.
The scene in Dirty Harry is like the scene that's on every American's mind right now, because you got all these blacks moving into your town. They seem to have a different culture. They get involved in gangs. The gangs are criminal enterprises. They're violent. We don't know what to do. The churches have capitulated to the civil rights movement. What are we going to do? And the answer is, well, pull out a gun. The gun is the solution to this problem. And the classic scene in Dirty Harry is where he's, robbing the bank. He's got a .44 Magnum, which is the biggest gun ever made. And with 6 bullets, he not only stops a car, he stops that. And then he's there with the final scene, and he says, I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, did I fire 5 bullets or 6? And well, I'm going to tell you this is the biggest gun ever made. And the question I have is, do you feel lucky, punk?
Well, do you, punk?
Now, this is the classic representation of everybody's racial fears at this moment. And you see here, the gun has become the magic wand. The gun is the magic wand that is going to solve the race problem, because it corresponds to me, a one man, all by myself. This is the way I am right now. I'm a single guy. It became part of American mythology. Who killed Kennedy? It was a lone, deranged gunman. That's crazy. That was what Allen Dulles told Walter Cronkite to say. Allen Dulles was head of the CIA. He told Walter Cronkite to say, I remember seeing it when I came home that night and watched it on television. I was a sophomore in high school when that happened. That's not what it was. It was a coup d'etat. But the whole point of this is mobilizing American thought around these archetypal images, archetypal for Americans, and one of them is the gun. And you can solve this problem simply by buying a gun. So it's consumerism as well. And on top of that, you can buy an identity. And you can be Clint Eastwood now and be the guy who solves the race problem that way.
And then, of course, when I listen to that falls so neatly into this, what appears to be this provocation to incite violence. And so that way they could hammer down on that act and use it for all manner of Lord knows what. And I think this is deeply disconcerting. When I was listening to your interview with Gemma, and there were so many things that I was disappointed to hear. And one of them being like the idea of like with black people in general, the idea of struggling families. But this is an issue that's just isolated to just because they're black. This has to do with the family unit. Where's the father? Fatherlessness is a major issue in this country, and then we wonder why these kids aren't raised right, because where's the father? And this isn't a problem that's unique to black culture. This is unique. Happens to all manner of cultures, Mexican people, white people. Fatherlessness is a real thing, and it's a real detriment to society, but so much of it is like obstinately ignored, and it's right away put because of race. And honestly, there's this satanic speech hint to that speech of like that it would be some sort of a compassionate thing to not have these black people have any families at all, because apparently they're just going to go into drugs and violence and gangs, and that's simply not true. And the satanic element is the trajectory of that is, why have life when life is so miserable? It's so chaotic. It would be better to not live at all. And this is what's so disconcerting when I was listening to those kind of sentiments.
Well, the solution to the Negro problem was contraception. That's simple. The state of Pennsylvania had decided that they were going to fund birth control. The government's going to pay for birth control. They're going to set up birth control clinics in black churches. Well, wait a minute. This is exactly what Margaret Sanger's solution was. It's called the Negro Project, and Planned Parenthood was behind it. So basically, give them birth control, and they will go out of existence because they won't have children. Well, that didn't work. That didn't work. What you had was, in effect, women knowing that if they had children and went on welfare, they could earn a lot more money. But that was the solution. The man who understood this was Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a Catholic, who thought like a Catholic. Okay, he was also a drunk. Which didn't help him. He also turned into a bootlicker of the people in New York City, which is how he got elected to the Senate. But back when he was a decent guy in 1963, he said, the difference is family. The problem among black people is illegitimacy. And the problem is it's out of control. 21% of all blacks are born out of wedlock. Well, guess what? It's 80% now, because the WASP elite, which saw birth control as a problem, poured gasoline on the fire, and they destroyed the black family. Now, if you go back to the IQ, if people who actually take the IQ test, like people here, if you straighten that out, if you compare family to family as opposed to single child to single child, illegitimate child to illegitimate child, you'll realize that the whole notion of racial intelligence, the racial differential, disappears. The crucial issue is not whether you're black. The crucial issue is whether you have a father in the home. If you don't have a father in the home, you're not going to be a successful person. It's that simple. That's what the WASP elite suppressed. And that's what basically drove the WASP elite out of existence.
Dr. Jones, it just doesn't make any sense. It's deeply frustrating. Nobody is in the uterus and gets to decide, I want to be born in this country. I want to be part of this nation. We can't pick our race or where we're from. And at the core of it, once again, I'm afraid it's that nasty pride again. And I think this is what it's the core of it. It's prideful, and it goes back to the idea of rejecting God. Don't need to go to church every Sunday. Don't need to go to confessions. Don't need the sacraments, because I've got this history of my race in this country, and this supersedes, for a lot of these people, and this is where the grift comes in, it supersedes Catholic identity, and it comes down to pride. And I think that's at the heart of the issue.
Well, that's exactly what happened with the Reformation, isn't it? The Reformation meant the creation of national churches, which meant that basically the group of believers is now living on an island in England. And if you look around in the 16th century, we look pretty much all the same. Even though there's a little bit of race mixing there too, because we had the Norman invasion, we had the Danes, the Anglo-Saxons coming in, we had the Celts. These are all different races, but hey, we all kind of look the same now. And so therefore we can define the elect as basically us, as the English. And then the Puritans caught on to this idea and weaponized it even further. This is a distillation of Protestantism that took place in England. Beginning with the theft of church property, the creation of the state church, didn't stop there, because there's no foundation to keep this thing stable. It's going to disintegrate, and it disintegrated into Puritanism, and the Puritans killed the king. They took over, and they were hated so much that they were eventually got kicked out. But where did they get kicked out to? They got kicked out over here, and no one's going to stop them out. And so they immediately took this rabid, racially defined form of ethnocentrism, and they sent it to America. to divide the slave population, black slaves or African slaves from European slaves in Virginia, but even worse in Massachusetts, where they defined themselves as God's chosen people. We are the new Israel. We are the Israelites, which means that anybody we don't like must be Amalek. And Amalek are the Indians. And the first thing they did was to exterminate the Indians. Now, wait a minute. This is not what happened in Mexico, and it is not what happened in Canada. Mexicans intermarried. You're Mexican. You are the cosmic race. You're a combination of Spanish and Indian cultures. In Canada, you're a combination of French and Indian cultures. In both instances where you had Catholics in charge, you had intermarriage. When you have Protestants in charge, you have genocide. It's that simple, and that's led all the way up to the point right now where America is sponsoring genocide in Gaza. This is completely consistent with the satanic root of America, which is Protestantism, the Judaizing form of Christianity known as Protestantism.
You know, I listen to it's refreshing and reassuring to hear, because so much of it makes sense, and we need to have these conversations, because I'm going to point out a couple comments. We're not the only ones that are exploring this and what it means to us and how it impacts our lives. You know, it gives grifters away when they put race and nation first, but yet claim to be Christian or Catholic. I mean, what are we getting at here? We're going to all go to heaven, and then these people are going to say, all right, we're all in heaven. Christian Catholics that are from Europe over here, brown Christian Catholics over here, black. It doesn't make any sense. It becomes so incoherent. And again, at the core of it, I just see pride as the main driver for this. And I want to point out this comment, and it has to do with one of the videos that I do on this subject. This man wrote, "I'm a Mexican Catholic who is engaged to someone who is a light-skinned woman. Father black, mother white. She converted to the faith recently. I used to be a big follower of Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. When this issue would come up, I would have inevitably to be quiet. Thank God for EMJ, because he opened my eyes to the beauty of what God has done with the union of my fiance and I. God willing, we can explain to our children the beauty of both of our cultures and the greatness that God is, because he took the best of it and they are the product of that union." Here's one more. "I can relate to this, and I also struggle with it. I actually messaged E. Michael Jones over Facebook because I was so lost in dialogue between Nick Fuentes, Pine Sap, I don't know who that is, and others promoting that race mixing is a terrible thing, and that generally those people and their children are mostly doomed. My mother is white and my father is black, and I am an interracial person. So what does this mean for me? Am I just a pawn in the scheme of oligarch Jewish plans? I mean, this is what we're thinking. This is what's isolating people, and they're just like looking at themselves, and they get caught up with these grifters, these race grifters, and they're just like, wait, this isn't actually a place for me, and I'm actually more alienated than I thought."
That's right. That's right. And the man, as you pointed out here, the man responsible for this is Nick Fuentes. Because, wait a minute, isn't that a Mexican name? Isn't his father Mexican? Sounds Mexican to me. Well, that means you're already race mixed. It means you're not white. I mean, believe me, there was a time when the Irish were not white. There was a time when the Italians were not white. And there was a time, maybe it still is, when the Mexicans are not white. Well, these are all kind of identity. What the point here is that race is a category of the mind that gets imposed for political reasons. So what do you mean by white? It means you're a good person. I mean, when I was a teenager, we would say things like, well, that was mighty white of you to do that. You know what I mean? Which means it was good of you to do that. It was a statement of approval. Well, the world has been turned upside down right now, and white is a way of demonizing people, and black is now good, okay, according to the federal government and according to all these affirmative action programs. So where do we stand in this dynamic? Well, it doesn't have anything to do with us, okay? The fundamental basis of identity in America, in the United States, is Protestant, Catholic, Jew. These are the religions that give you your identity. Your race or if you want to call it that, the color of your hair and the shape of your nose doesn't tell you how to act at all. You have to think in order to act. And when you think, you are channeling your language, your religion, your culture, your heritage, and that's your identity. And to say, well, what about race? This race mixing thing has no basis whatsoever in Catholic thought. It has no basis whatsoever. It cannot have any basis. If we go back to the fundamental crisis at the beginning of Christianity, it was basically St. Peter and St. Paul. And St. Paul is confronting St. Peter because it looks as if in order to become a Christian, you have to be circumcised. In other words, in order to become a Christian, I've got to become a Jew first. Well, no, that's not true. And Paul had to upbraid him, rebuke him to his face and say, no, this is not what this means anymore. Those are obsolete categories. You're not determined by your race. You're determined by your beliefs. Jesus said it to the Jews. You know, the Jews say, well, we're the seed of Abraham. Well, no. Are you a child of Moses? That's the real issue, because the child can act. Your DA doesn't act. Your DA doesn't tell you what to think. But a child can act, and if you want to be a child of Moses, you have to accept me as the Messiah. And that's precisely the breaking point. So the Jews took their racial, ethnocentric ideas and went off by themselves. And the culmination of this is what is happening in Gaza right now, because it leads to genocide. The ethnocentric racial thought leads to genocide. That's where it is right now.
Staggering and powerful to hear these things, because it's all true. Dr. Jones, I think I'll cap that point with this. Free will is a beautiful thing. Everybody can do what they want. But if you're going to call yourself Christian or Catholic, I'm going to take a look at what you're putting first. And it's, I think that's an easy telltale sign of what is your modus operandi and what you're quote unquote fighting for, or what you believe in, and I think that says it all.
Dude, race is real. This is the type of boomer, drop dead, and so on down the line. Yeah, this is the type of response I'm getting here because people, I guess, you're holding on. So what do you mean you're white? You're a Protestant who stopped going to church. Okay, you're completely spiritually desolated. This is the last thing you're going to hold on to. And here comes the EMJ, and he's going to kick the ladder out from your escape hatch. And so no wonder there's anger here. But I'm saying, look, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're looking for love in all the wrong places. This is not going to save you. Your DNA is not going to save you. I said before, and I'll say it again, every single black, every single African, or every single Muslim who comes to Ireland comes there to replace the Irish babies that you aborted. So take that as your starting point. Because once you put it in that sense, you got to talk about repentance, rather than this IRA insurrection attitude, which is satanic. All these rebellious attitudes are satanic. So I got an email from Ravi, my friend in England, an Indian who converted to Catholicism. He and Sean have been showing up at Speaker's Corner in London to support Nick Cotton, who wants to talk to the Muslims. That's the whole point. I've been talking about Logos. Logos is not a gun. The gun is the end of Logos, which means we're not going to talk anymore. That's it. That puts the end to the discussion. So Ravi is living in an apartment building, and there are blacks there, and the blacks are behaving like blacks. They got it from here. Where do you think the music transmits this virus? So they listen to hip hop, and they are acting like hip hop people, and he doesn't know what to do. So he says, what am I going to do? Am I going to get a gun like Clint Eastwood? No, he says, I'm going to talk to them. And so what he did, he and his wife went down there, and they handed out candy bars, and it changed the entire atmosphere. This is the Catholic way to deal with it. And people are going to have to make up their minds. Okay, you can claim you're Catholic because you were baptized, because your father came from so-and-so place, But you're going to have to start thinking like a Catholic. This is not just a DNA operation. This is a thought operation. And you're going to have to start thinking according to Catholic categories. And the gun is not a Catholic category. And race mixing is not a Catholic category. You're going to have to, logos is a Catholic category, and logos means speech. And if you decide maybe I should talk to these people, you may get surprising results.
Agreed, 100%, Dr. Jones. I'm going to pivot a little bit. Halloween's around the corner, and I've got to ask you, Doc, who is your favorite horror author?
I have three, okay? I did the book called Monsters from the Id, and I think that the three paradigms of horror would be Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, which is based on the French Revolution, and then you have Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, which is in some sense evocative of the Russian Revolution as it manifests in Germany, because that's when that's when Dracula was turned into a film. Early on, Vampire and then Nosferatu. These were the products of the German film industry. And this had to do with, so that's, first one is the reaction to the French Revolution. This is the reaction to Hitler's reaction to the First World War, the destruction of Germany, the spread of Jewish influence, which contaminated the blood. He was a blood thinker. He was a race thinker. And the vector was syphilis. And that's what Dracula is about. It's about syphilis. And then the final one was Giger's, not Giger, but he's collaborated, but Alien. Yeah. Which is a collaboration of a lot of different people. So Hans-Rudy Giger was the artist who created the monster in Alien. It was created by, Ridley Scott was the director. A guy named O'Bannon was the story guy who told the story. But it all came together as the monster, which is the expression of the sexual revolution of the 1960s. And so what happens is you have, this is in the 1970s, it came out in 1979. It's a comment on the early 70s, which is the high watermark of sexual revolution. In particular, the pornographic film Deep Throat, which is about oral sex. So oral sex was supposed to be funny then, but now by the end of the 70s, nobody thinks it's funny anymore. And now, this is what happens in Alien. It's hard to see unless you know the background, but basically that face monster sticks its penis down John Hurt's throat. Everything seems okay, and then suddenly his stomach explodes. This is the metaphor for what sexuality has become at the end of the 1970s. This is the consequence of sexual liberation. It's guilt, it's hatred of the portraying the fetus as a monster, and that is the result of abortion. You have to portray it as a monster because you killed your child, and so on and so forth. So they're the three that come to my mind. Brilliant.
And that's I've listened to so many of your talks and these topics before, and couldn't agree more. For me, and I like your thoughts on this too, is one of my favorite authors is H.P. Lovecraft, particularly this idea of cosmic horror, this idea of the old ones. Are you familiar with this? I'm sure
his stuff has been made into a number of different movies.
Yes. Particularly the one that comes to mind, which is really good, I'm going to ask you about, is the H.P. Lovecraft story is called In the Mountains of Madness, but there was a movie that came out back in the 90s, which is really good. It was called In the Mouth of Madness, and it had Sam, I forget the guy from Jurassic Park, really great actor. Have you ever seen it? Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't heard of it. No.
Really great horror movie. But what are your thoughts on that? H.P. Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu. I think it's intoxicatingly rich. This idea of old tentacle squid-like beings that are aeons old and somehow, are ambivalent towards everything and at the same time are, deeply mysterious.
Yeah. First, I think there are two aspects here. First is Darwinism, which basically turned the universe into an alien place. So you have somebody like Jack London writing a book, a short story called To Start a Fire. So it's basically Jack London, the man alone in the wilderness, we're all by yourself. You had one other guy there, it might have been better, walking through the Klondike when it's 75 below zero. Well, why is this typical of nature? When Wordsworth wanted to portray nature, he went out and walked along the side of that pond in the Lake District, and he watched daffodils and wanted to dance with the daffodils. What happened is that Darwin turned the universe into a predatory place. That's one aspect of it, the predatory universe. The second aspect of all of these horror fictions is basically, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand it. And so I'll create this monster, which the monster is basically the expression of the fact that I don't understand what's going on. You know, you put the two together, and these are the fictions. So especially in the 1950s, the fictions of like the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, filmed by Don Siegel, famous horror film. Something went wrong. I don't understand what it is. Something changed here. I mean, that's supposed to be Uncle Harry, but it's not Uncle Harry. He's a pod person. What happened here? Well, the answer is social engineering. The answer is the CIA. Nobody knew what they were doing. They had basically created an apparatus that took over the government. And the final blow for the takeover was the murder of John F. Kennedy. That was a coup d'etat that was orchestrated by the Israelis and the CIA to take over the country. And so, again, what you have is a false explanation. A lone deranged gunman took over, killed Kennedy. No, it wasn't that. But that was what you were told because they wanted to keep you ignorant.
Yeah. Doug, and that being said, when we talk about horror, of course I'm going to bring up Stephen King. Now, I've heard some things about Stephen King, and it is whatever, but there's some of his works that I do enjoy, a lot of them, and I like your thoughts on one book in particular. I never read it, but I did watch one of my favorite miniseries back in the 90s, and I'm talking about Stephen King's book, The Stand. What have you heard of it?
No,
have you read
I haven't
it?
seen it. No. Tell me the story. What is it?
The Stand is an epic. I saw it at a used bookstore, and it was behind the glass, selling for $200. But anyway, The Stand is an epic story of like these people that are. It's the world is facing annihilation because of a virus, right? And things are happening so quickly, and the story pivots between like 6 or 7 different characters, right? All from different backgrounds. Yet they're chosen, it seems, for a particular role. Now, Stephen King has like a sort of reoccurring antagonist, deeply mysterious, on a chaotic side, evil, and he's in the story as well. His name is, I think it's called Randolph Flagg, and he's in there, right? He's the satanic figure. And he's kind of the ringmaster of what's happening, and they all kind of gather in Las Vegas, and it's this whole story, and it's at the end it's a little bit about redemption and hope that good does prevail over evil.
Okay, and how does that happen?
Well, I don't want to give the story away, but basically it involves sacrifice. A couple people die, they don't make it, and that one person's sacrifice was particularly notable was because he had come from a life of sin, and at the last second he decided to sacrifice himself for the greater good.
Okay, and why did he do that? Where did he hear this idea, this sacrifice? Was this in Darwin's book? I forget which part of Darwin's Origin of the Species where this idea of self-sacrifice came from. This is all residual Christianity that you abandoned. When you abandon Christianity, the world becomes an alien, threatening place. It's that simple. Everything, because you're not protected. There are all kinds of evil forces out there that you don't have any protection against. And so therefore you better buy a gun. Well, that's not going to solve you either. So you see the predicament that people are in. So you have all of these residual understandings, residual ideas that you don't know where they came from. And so I'll give you, it's a classic instance from the book. But basically, when Thoreau is a disciple of Emerson, they are both in total rebellion against Calvinism, because Calvinism said that nature was completely fallen and man was totally depraved. And that's not really the sense you get. I mean, so look, sometimes you go out and it's a beautiful day, and you're glad to be alive. And this is what Thoreau did when he went to Walden Pond. And you can learn from nature, because God created nature. He created it for you. Now, there's a wound there because of the fall. Okay? But then the Calvinists overemphasize that. So these guys say, well, no, there's no wound at all. Everything is perfect. It's heaven on earth. And then he goes on to say, and a morning in spring is like the forgiveness of sins. Now, wait a minute. Well, I love mornings in spring, but wait a minute. Where did you get that idea that sin can be forgiven? It has to come from the Catholic Church. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And whosoever sins you shall forgive, they are forgiven. Whoever sins you shall retain, they are retained. It's a completely Catholic concept that comes from Revelation, which is not dependent on nature. It's above nature. It's supernature. And grace perfects nature. That's where it came from. That's where we're seeing all this type of stuff.
But Doc, what are we going to do about this lethargy amongst us believers? And I be, as a fellow sinner, I don't always make it to confession. But I tell you what, my church offers it on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m., a 30-minute window. And there's usually, the last time I went, there were three people, which is not shocking. There were two old Mexican ladies, and there was me. And I do mean the word lethargy. There's so many that are so reluctant to go to confession, and they're just like, no, I'm just going to do it at home, or I'll just kind of just think to myself, okay, God, I got some sins I got to go over in the privacy of your home. But I wish we could just turn it around. But it has to start from within.
Wait, where did you get this? As I said, where did you get this idea that your sins can be forgiven? Where'd you get it? It's from the Catholic Church. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, so you're not a member. You call yourself a Christian. You're even smarter than the Catholic Church, and you can go off into your room and confess to yourself. Where did it say that? The only way you can have this relief from guilt is by going to the Catholic Church and doing it according to God's plan, which means you have to confess to the priest, and the priest is the one who can give you absolution for your sins. That's the only way this is possible. If you think the other way around, you're delusional. You're delusional. And I'm saying that delusion lasted for a while. And I think that Clint Eastwood is one of the greatest American thinkers to come along. I mean, that's like being the world's tallest midget, I know. But I mean, he's a great American thinker, great American artist. And if you want the story of this, he did a movie called Unforgiven.
Well, you sure killed the hell out of that fella today.
Hell yeah. I killed the hell out of him, didn't I? 3 shots and he was taking a shit.
Take a drink, kid.
Jesus Christ.
Now, this is about America. Okay, now the town, it's a classic Western. The town is Big Whiskey, and it goes back. You got High Noon, you got the Virginian, you got this established with all sorts of in between. Except now, this is America in 1992, and guess what? The only women in this film are whores. There were whores in other cowboy movies, but there were also respectable women. The respectable women have all disappeared. And this is a man who's going to be drawn back. He was a contract killer before. He's drawn back to do it again because he wants the easy money. And he's plagued with guilt. Well, you can't get forgiveness of sin here. The whole point of this is you're damned. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. And so the big showdown. The marshal is corrupt. He's a criminal. The women are all whores. And he's got to come in. He wants the money, and so he shoots the sheriff. So it's a complete reversal of the classic Western, where the sheriff shoots the bad guy. Now the bad guy shoots the sheriff, and the sheriff, when he's the one who's dying there, he says, "I'll see you in hell."
I don't deserve this. To die like this. I was building a house. Deserves got nothing to do with it. I'll see you in hell, white money. Yeah.
This is theological. In other words, if you separate yourself from the source of grace, you are, Calvinism's true. You are depraved. And you are predestined. And you can't get away from that. Oh, there's no redemption for your sins. You're right back. The dog returned to his vomit. He's doing what he did before. And, you know, it's going to be, you kill me, and I go to hell, and you go to hell. We both go to hell. And that's the whole point. It's unforgiven. There's no forgiveness anymore. That's America. It's over. That's 1992, the high watermark of American hubris, because America had just won the Cold War. And we were the sole superpower now, and we were great. And why is he doing this? Because he's a genius. Clint Eastwood is a genius when it comes to American identity.
Man, look at this. Oh, look at this, man. Check this out. What you supposed to be, man?
Nah, it's cool, dog.
What the fuck you doing in my neighborhood, boy?
Right to the stereotype thesaurus.
Oh, yeah.
Call me whore and a bitch in the same sentence.
Ooh. This is crazy. Fuck you looking at, old man? Huh?
What the hell are these spooks up to?
Fuck you think you is?
And he understood it, the moment of everyone, all the neocons are thumping their chest about how we won the Cold War, and he gets to the heart of this thing, and basically, we're all going to hell. We're all going to hell. Every woman's a whore. All the cops are criminals. This is the culmination of this great American experiment. It failed completely because it was satanic from its inception. That simple.
Yeah, I just think of like the people listening to that, the diehards who it seems like they do some selective reading about American history and turn a blind eye to so much stuff that America is responsible for as far as negative things. And it just is what it is. I mean,
it's shocking. I'm going to be the first one to it. I'm shocked when I hear this coming out of my mouth. I'm shocked. But I'm only shocked because I have to draw the logical conclusion from all of the evidence, you know. And so I said when I was on doing the interview with Candace Owen, she made the mistake of asking me like, "What's the future hold?" Shouldn't have asked me that question because I'll give you the answer. And the answer is we got two alternatives: it's Catholicism or Satanism. And the intermediary there, it's Protestant, Catholic, Jew here. It's now Protestantism or Satanism, because Satanism is the hidden grammar of Protestantism. And it took us a while to figure this out, but all of those churches are disappearing now. If you take the mainline Protestant churches, the Episcopalians, the Methodists, and the Presbyterians, they're all competing for about 37 homosexuals here. They're all flying the homosexual flag. They're completely taken over by a homosexual cabal. That's that side. Now, you go to the other side, like the Baptist, the Christian Zionist. The Baptist just sent a letter to President Biden demanding that he send more weapons to Israel. So the Baptists, so here you got the mainstream Protestants promoting sodomy, and you got the lower end of the food chain, the Baptist, promoting genocide. Well, wait a minute. What's this got to do? Now you realize that Clint Eastwood was way ahead of his time when he said, look, the other thing about Big Whiskey, as opposed to Hadleyville, which is the town where High Noon takes place, there's no church in Big Whiskey. The big confrontation between good and evil is preceded by Marshall, the sheriff, going to the church and standing there in front of the congregation and saying, I need help. And then he doesn't get it. And at that point, he's got to be the man all by himself, the single guy with a gun who's going to face down evil, which is the classic American trope. There is no church in Big Whiskey, which is the city where, the town where Unforgiven takes place.
Ned, you remember that drover I shot through the mouth and his teeth came out the back of his head? I think about him now and again. He didn't do anything to deserve to get shot. At least nothing I could remember when I sobered up.
No church, cops are all criminals, and the women are all whores. That's America. I mean, he was a genius. That is America. Tell me where I'm wrong. That was 1992. Has it gotten better since 1992? We are on the brink of war now because this satanic ideology is going to lead to destruction. Inexorably.
Dr. Jones, and I'm gonna dovetail this to a Mother Teresa quote that has to do with the theme of using violence for everything as a solution for everything. Mother Teresa, any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love, but to use violence to get what they want. That is why the greatest destroyer of love and peace is abortion, and it makes total sense. It's like that's the default of this, and you see it metastasize into micro things in life. The increase in regression, in generally speaking, one manifestation of that is road rage. Right? We're so ready that as soon as we get inconvenienced, we're so ready to get out of a car and shoot somebody. We're so ready if anybody inconveniences us at work, we're ready to fight them. You know, all this aggression because we're so much of the mentality is, okay, well, I Christian, Catholic, yeah, I like it, but it's secondary to race, country first. And if anybody gets in my way, I'll shoot my way out. And this is what they want, and that's not the solution. That's what
we're doing right now. We have so why did you go into the Ukraine? Because you're gonna rule the world. Who did it? It was the Victoria Nuland who got us involved in this. She's related with the Kagan family. You know, it's this group who are going to want to rule the world. And the lesson, what's the lesson they're teaching? It's on Twitter. This guy, Dr. Eli Cohen. The message of this, what's happening right now is...
Which was? Don't fuck with the Jews.
That's what he said. That means if you do anything that annoys these people, they have a right to... They have a right to... That is the message that we're getting from Lebanon. And the only people who are standing up to this right now is Iran. And there's a stalemate now, thank God. Because I don't think the Israelis, the United States is not going to allow the Israelis to bomb the nuclear whatever, or they can't let them bomb the oil refineries. We go down the drain. That's suicide. If we bomb this, on Twitter, bomb, here's the before and after. This guy is so clever. Before, this is the Karg Island oil refinery, whatever. After, wait for that, because Israel is going to destroy the Karg oil. How much oil comes from Iran through the Straits of Hormuz? You cut that off. What is it? 40%, 50% of the world's oil supply? Because if you bomb Karg Island, the Iranians are going to shut down the the choke point at the Straits of Hormuz. They're going to shut that down. You shut that down, oil price goes through the roof. Oil price goes through the roof, the derivatives kick in. The derivatives kick in, the whole economy implodes because there's not enough money in the universe to pay off those derivatives. We're talking about trillions of dollars in derivatives, and that will blow up the economy. So thank God there is some adult in the room somewhere in the United States of America who understands the consequences of this. Are you listening here? Okay? Because this is suicide. This is the Samson option. You're gonna deal with Iran. You're gonna drag everybody down with you, drag the entire world down with you. Well, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that there are still people in the Pentagon who are saying, no thanks. This is suicide. We're not going to do it.
Curveball. Dr. Jones, are we living in the times of the Book of Revelations?
Let me get where's my crystal ball here? I got to get my, here it is. Wait a minute. I got a crystal ball here. It's right here. So wait just a second. Just a second. Here it is. Here's my crystal ball. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not seeing anything. Damn, you got this crystal ball and I'm not seeing it. How am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to answer this question? Only God knows this. Even Jesus Christ said this. Only God knows the day and the hour, the time and the hour. Only God the Father, even God the Son didn't know it. So all I can do is talk about the past. I can talk about what I can talk about. I can talk about a trend in American history that has led us to the brink here. I can try to explain that. I can only explain the past. You can know the past, but you can't change it. You can change the future, but you can't know it. And so we're stuck right in the middle here. So sorry, it didn't work.
I'm going to wrap this up here. I want to say make sure you're reading Dr. E. Michael Jones's work. Absolutely. What comes to mind is the Jewish revolutionary spirit. He referenced what happened at Masada, and the whole themes about suicide and the Jews. So make sure you definitely read that book. It actually comes pretty quickly, so it's not too far if you just start it today. Gotta love his
Go
culture.
to fidelitypress.org is the only place you can find this book. Yep. Thanks to censorship of the media. fidelitypress.org.
There you have it, and I also urge you to go sign up for your Culture Wars magazine every month. I'm going to be doing a monthly article review on my channel because I love talking about his work, and there's some great writing material every month on Culture Wars magazine as well.
And also, I have to add that this is not just by me. There are people all over the world who are seeing that these categories make sense from their perspective, and they're contributing to Culture Wars magazine.
That's exactly right, and it's all great reading. I highly encourage you to do that. Dr. Jones, can we have the last word?
Yes. What is it? Oh, wait a minute. Let me get back here. I'm getting a last. Logos is rising.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dr. Jones, and I'll see you guys next time.
All right. Actually, I should have put my hat on again.
Yeah, we should have put our hat back
In
on.
München steht ein Hofbräuhaus.
It's all right. We're going to take a picture with our hats. Are you going to do a little Macbeth with your...
No, it's Hamlet, actually.
That's Hamlet. Excuse me.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. He was a man of infinite wit.